this cult we're in is great. It's getting that weird kind of like vibe, like kind of like everyone's overly happy.
Right. Yeah, it was so weird. It was such a weird like family moment where I'm just like, I don't want this right now. Maybe in like issue 7, but not issue 1.
There was no explanation. That's the thing is they just like shoved it in your
They're
face.
just
Like
there. Yeah.
these characters all back all together. Everyone's like getting along. I was like, didn't Vulcan kill like at one point he killed like their father, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I do
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah, during the whole story arc where he became like the emperor of the Shar Empire. In that
Yeah.
arc, he straight up like wrecked most of the Starjammers and killed Corsair.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
why are any of these people here? Why are they all friends?
Hit on
I,
the moon.
I've been out of the game too long. I just don't. Maybe they explained some of it coming up, or maybe this is just Hickman being like, "Hey, we're prepping some crazy shit, and we're gonna do a quick jump here, and we'll bring you up to speed at the end, but it's still gonna take a long time."
It's gonna take a while, but that's Hickman's thing. It's like, oh, here's a little nugget of something, and you're just like, what does this mean? And he's all like, you'll find out in a year.
Oh, definitely, he's gonna he's gonna feed you, but he's gonna take a long walk to get to that pond.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He's gonna slow roast you.
It's it's unfortunate that we have other writers actually writing alongside him because I don't know how they're gonna keep toe and toe with his weird plot development. I feel like normally when he's focused on one particular thing, like how he was just kind of relegated to writing the Fantastic Four story,
Right.
he worked a lot better. But when you stretch him out in a way that he's being used now, like to work alongside of other people that are trying to keep pace with him, it's going to be weird. Like, how do you write in response to what Jonathan Hickman's doing? Because you can't predict it. You don't know what's going on. He's got an endgame idea that you'll never guess. And unless he's letting you in on it, you're fucked.
Well, I assume he's letting you in on it. I assume Marvel editorial would have some play in it, but it's Marvel editorial, and you know how Marvel editorial is. They're kind of
Well, with the
up.
way they handled their writers and a lot of their staffing, it gets very ego. I guess you could say ego driven in how they decide a lot of their choices. Like people become kind of clicky, and then they take an ego that their clique is based on, and they kind of push that narrative when they're like, "Oh, well, we have our hand in it now." Like you've read stories where like two different writing crews are writing like one character, and like when you read a story written by one person, you're like, okay, I get the narrative, I feel the character. But then you read it written by the other one, and it's like a complete contrasting take on the character, and you're like, these are both stories that are going in tandem. How the fuck is Spider-Man in this issue acting like about face in just the very next issue?
Right. Yeah.
So they have to have unity. So if there isn't that kind of form of camaraderie and like, I guess you could say co-authoring, there's gonna be like consistencies in the lore and in the character portrayal and just plot devices. We're gonna get bad plot devices.
Oh, absolutely. And there's going to be a little bit of that. It's just going to happen no matter what. It's that's a Marvel thing. Unfortunately, things fall between the cracks. Writers like to do their own things. They like to go on their own roads. There's no way they're going to reel it in, especially like I mean, just look how they handled Secret Wars.
that mess, that mess where they're like, this is the
And
status quo. We're
That
changing it.
was Hickman. That was Hickman right there. And the editorial was just like, no, this is no longer a reboot.
He was there in name and maybe in spirit, but I don't know what much. He's like, I have an idea, and they're like, we have a lot of ideas.
We have plenty of ideas. Let me
We'll work
shut you
yours
down
in.
on 10. Yeah.
It'll be edged in somewhere, but it'll be in the background. See, you'll see the arm of Hickman's idea waving in a portrait shot, and you're just like, that was where it started right back there, but this is what it turned into once everyone got involved. And then they reset most of it anyways, where they're like, this is gonna matter. Secret Wars is big. And then like 2 issues deep into the into the new like aftermath, and it's just like, forget all that stuff. Forget it.
That's funny. That's funny. All right.
Oh man.
But
All right.
that's such a Marvel thing to do too.
So we're gonna have to
Uh,
decipher some interesting issues in tandem, but I'm excited to at least make our way through House of X and Powers of X because that was well done. I'll
it was
admit,
well
now that
done. Oh yeah.
said and done, I expected worse, and I expected like much more. I guess you could say pandering it felt more organic, like a story being told by someone instead of a narrative being hijacked by like policies and political fervor. So Hickman's
Yeah.
good at writing like compelling stories and not so much trying to be preachy.
Absolutely. It's rare that I get that from Marvel where I'm like, I'm gonna deep dive into the story. I'm gonna do this because I trust Jonathan Hickman. I trust where he's gonna go with it, and I trust that he's gonna be a good storyteller. What other writers can you say that about? Marvel or DC?
Currently not. Yeah, no, not many. Not many at all, but with Hickman, it's just like, I mean, he's had me since like he introduced the Council of Reeds. Like
Oh
once
yeah.
I read that, I was
Ooh,
like, this is
yeah.
amazing. Like this dude he's just writing Fantastic Four, but he wrote a pocket multiverse in the Fantastic Four story plot line that like subsedes even any of the really other multiversal characters. Because everyone's big on like, look, I'm from this multiverse, I'm this multiverse.
Right.
Well, here's a multiverse of just Reed Richards that sits outside the realm of everyone else's like nonsense and day-to-day lives that's having this greater conflict all beside all the main story arcs, all this. Like Hickman's run on Fantastic Four could have been like a summer story event in itself, but it was its own self-contained just run on it was just his run on it. It was like, and now
Yeah.
Hickman's writing Fantastic Four, kind of like how people got big about like what Scott Snyder did and like with Batman.
Yeah, that was I was actually gonna say like the only person I could think of right now is maybe like New 52 Scott Snyder, like even a little bit of like what he's doing now with the whole Last Night on Earth, or not the what is the one where he's carrying Joker's head around at the moment. Fuck, what's the name of that? I already forgot. I think it's Last Night on Earth, right?
I think it is. It's like or Last Night in Gotham or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Final,
But like
something in that kind of thing.
but I would say like Snyder at his most Snyderiest is the only person I could. Is that a thing? Can I say that? His most Snyderiest?
I could see that being coined as a phrase. It could be memed. It definitely could be memed. It's very Snyder of you.
Yeah. Oh, that's so Snyder of you. What are you doing? Telling an actual cohesive story? How dare you?
You're building up a greater plot. You're developing characters. You're expanding on old existing characters, but in a way that doesn't hurt them. It just grows them. My God,
why would you do such a thing? Why?
Sacrifice everything just to move the story forward? You, sir, are some sort of wizard. Right. Yeah, you're not going to get that kind of with anyone else. Hickman and people like Snyder are like rare and few. The stories are usually progressed by other means and weird narratives that are just messy, especially when you have the back end of the movies that have so much pressure being put on the actual day-to-day comic content that comes out weekly. Like that stuff influences it so heavily that the main story can get muddled in an instant for no reason. You're just like, wait, why is this character getting elevated? Or why is Black Widow able to beat Magic in the dimension of Limbo? Oh yeah, because Black Widow, she's in the new Avengers movie coming out.
Of course, because she's in the movie. Yeah,
and Marvel doesn't have the rights to X-Men right now, so of course like we can't elevate an X-Men over an Avengers character. We got tickets to sell. What is this? You think it's comic books? These aren't comic books. Get out of here. We're trying to make movies.
We're trying to sell toys here. Come on now.
Come on, man. We got to deal with Hasbro. Oh, Jesus.
That's funny. All right. So House of X issue 2. We are recording, by the way. I've been recording for like 8 minutes now.
I was going to dive into it. Yeah, I was like,
so let's just get into it right now. So
let's just do it live. Fuck it, do it
live.
Fuck
it, we'll do it live.
To quote the great Bill O'Reilly. Oh, jeez.
To quote the great Bill O'Reilly.
I was laboring that term.
I like how you kind of hesitated a little bit there.
Yeah, I was just like, these words don't always go together, but they sound funny.
I don't want people to remember I'm divorced, much less find out I'm the father of some sort of
son, Joe. He's a boy, and he needs his father.
Well, tell him that Xavier's his father. You always wanted it that way. You fool, McTaggert.
So Dan, House of X, we're on like what? You said issue 2?
So we're starting up on issue 2, and this starts off with a retcon. One of the bigger retcons, and that you find out instantly that Moira is a mutant. Now, we know from the past that Moira is indeed she's never been a mutant before. She's helped the new mutants back in the day. She's been a big pivotal role in with Xavier and the X-Men, but not a mutant. What do you think of this? What do you think of her being a mutant? Like, we start off with her just living a life, right? She gets sick at age 13. and then she gets better. She lives a life all the way to 75, and then she dies. And then suddenly you find out she's reincarnated, and that's the moment you realize she is a mutant. What did you think of this when you first read it?
So, on the concept of Moira McTaggert being a mutant, I feel like that was a bold move out of the gate because it immediately created plot holes that I don't feel like were overlooked. You could say in a way they were, but I feel like they were purposely overlooked in a way to kind of create a provocative nature to the character. As strange as it is and feels kind of like maybe a bit of a kind of a lazy retcon, they do later on kind of address some of the issues, but off the bat it's a weird thing because Moira isn't a mutant. She's a human because they point out kind of historically, and a lot of older fans of X-Men kind of point out historically, they'll be like, wait, she was the first human to die of the legacy virus, which is only supposed to affect mutants, and her whole sacrifice was to be like a grand memorial type of moment for her character as like a human sacrificing herself for the mutants because the legacy virus was tied in a really dark storyline with the mutant massacre and a lot of those things. Like,
Right.
didn't like Colossus died in that one?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So there was like a lot of that impact was heavy, but the retcon to it was kind of even heavier because it was like, okay, well, she isn't and she was a mutant. What is all that stuff about? And like I was saying earlier, fortunately they addressed that later on in a way that I can live with because, and going ahead a little bit, they say like, we have to orchestrate her death in a way, and that's the nod. It's like, oh, they used the legacy virus to kind of like take her out of the picture. But that's not to get too far ahead of myself. Her being a mutant in general, it's just it's a new twist that I would have never expected. Like when they were talking about what House of X and Powers of X was going to be about, I knew that Moira was a big character, but when they started leaking that she was a mutant and all the information started coming out, it was a bit of a weird moment. Like you're excited, but you're also kind of like, this is weird. It left a strange taste, to be, more concise.
Absolutely, because like you've been with her for decades of just being a human helping out mutants, and now she is a mutant, and you're just like, because like her being a human kind of actually was important to show that like she is a human helping the mutant kind, mutantdom, like achieve their goals, their what they need to do, and like it showed kind of a bridge between humans and mutants at the time. So her
Yeah.
being a mutant is kind of like it kind of takes. Do you think it takes away from like her past stories?
Well,
A little bit?
it does hit the nail on the head what you were getting at. She was like a physical embodiment of what Charles' dream was. Is this bridge between humans and mutants working together to try to make the world a better place? That's what that relationship represented, whereas Magneto and Charles were like the contrast to it. So essentially, when you take that out of the picture, it does cheapen a lot of that history, but they do it in a way that's like really shocking. It's good, it's well written, but it's like you do still feel kind of hurt in a little bit of a way. Like you feel like, oh no, we're losing out on a lot of this historic, momentous like accomplishments for Charles and his cause, the things he wanted to do. But I mean, the story Hickman's telling is like essentially saying, well, that stuff's irrelevant now because the reality is hit. Mutants are in over their head, and they now have to deal with this new world moving forward. Like we're gonna mix things up, and they're gonna stay mixed up. There's no like the dust is not going to settle. The dust is just gonna remain up in the air, and they're gonna have to deal with the fallout. So I feel like Moira being a mutant is perfect for the world that Hickman set up. But if it was anyone else and it was any different story, I would feel like it was a lazy retcon, and I'd be a little upset. Because I mean, not only is she a mutant, boy, is she a mutant. What kind of power is that?
Yeah, right. Like out of all the powers she could get, she has some pretty OP powers, right? She has the
I mean,
ability to take. So like, did you notice that like we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but her lives kind of they kind of match with Marvel's multiverses a little bit.
yes, they coalesce in a way where the stories line up and they actually feel like you can take them apart and fit them in blocks where they naturally fit. And Hickman's writing does fill in those blocks, like I was saying, where they wrote off her using the legacy virus. They
Mhm.
reference that in the Hickman story to fit those blocks in. So it's crazy. It's you want to hate it, but because Hickman's doing it and the way they're doing it, you're like, all right, I can get behind this. This is kind of it's pulling
Yeah.
me back in. But it's
Yeah.
so crazy. Her powers, like,
It's
What?
intense, right?
I mean, think about it. We've
So
always had time travel
she
nonsense.
traverses, yeah, like time, like, but she's traversing like multiverses at this point. Would you like, right?
It's kind of she's creating her own like kind of multiversal system of rebirth. I guess like when her rebirths happen, it creates a new multiverse maybe, and that's the one we're seeing play out. But it's
Right.
like X-Men's had such terrible time travel shenanigans like fall apart upon them and like
Yeah,
become plot holes later on. I feel like this is the boldest one ever. I'm
this
like, you're not
really
only time
is.
traveling, you're like time traveling like 10, 11 different times. Like,
Because I definitely trust what Hickman's doing because this goes back to what we were talking about. Like no other writer I would trust to do this because I would just be like, what the hell is this? I'm out. I'm out. I don't trust you with what you're trying to do right now. But with Hickman, I do trust him. And that's going to be the problem because in what, like 5 years, 6 years, I don't know, however long this run lasts, it's going to be finite and someone's going to eventually take over. And that person, I'm not going to trust. And that's where we're probably going to see some weirdness happen with this, I think.
I think you're going to run into what is like the greater problem with comics in general is that eventually, after such a beautiful universe is built up, someone's going to come along and turn it into a trash fire.
Sure.
They're going to take it, steer it in the directions. I mean, there comes a point where they don't know what to do with the character, so they try way too radical with it. Like this Hickman stuff is pretty radical, but it fits. It's not retconning or radical for the sake of being radical. Like how I felt like Secret Empire was bad because they were just like, look, Captain America, he's in Hydra, he was a Nazi the whole time. I'm like, okay, now you're just being shocking for shocking's sake. Like you just want to sell issues. It's like a Superman that's gonna die ploy, like the death of Superman. Like, okay, I see what you're doing. You're trying to pull that shock value. Whereas no one's gonna be like, I gotta read these. Like no one walking by is gonna be like, Moira McTaggert's a mutant. I gotta read this. That's more of like you pull in the fans, and they're like, I want to know about this. That's why I love it because it's actually X-Men for the fans too. Like it feels like again for the first time in a decade we're getting X-Men stories and like mutant-based stories that are actually for people who enjoy like X-Men. They're not just like reading them because they're champions of the name. They're just like fair weather fan or like I guess you could say like Marvel fanboys because there are people who read X-Men for the last decade and were like, no, it was great, and I'm like, was it really that great? Was Avengers versus X-Men that great, or X-Men versus Inhumans that great, or any of that stuff? It just felt like Marvel was bitter about having the property and just was hanging on to it to get whatever they could out of it. Because even bad X-Men comics still sell good. It's like
Oh
Spider-Man.
yeah. Oh
All that stuff
yeah.
sells great. So it's like this is a return to more of a more enjoyable time. It felt like maybe like the early 2000s to late 2000s, not like the teens or oh gosh, like the late 80s, like going from like Claremont. Even
Mhm.
Grant Morrison's run was as ridiculous and insane as it was. It was filled with more wonder and nostalgia and bizarreness. Like
Oh
Zorn kind of
yeah.
feels like a Moira McTaggert character, like a weird retcon.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I see that
Because he's
for
super
sure.
powerful and super impactful, but like, who is he a mutant? Who is he? Is he Magneto?
Right.
Was it his brother? He has a brother, and
Mhm.
his brother was killed. It just really got away
It's
from itself.
yeah, they did. But yeah, yeah. Grant Morrison was out there, but I definitely enjoyed them for sure.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like we're in another one of those times where it's like with Hickman at the helm, we've got some fun stuff ahead of us, and if they can take that spirit and move forward, I think the next decade it might be decent X-Men. We'll see. I mean, when they get introduced in the movies, you're going to see the comics change again, I bet, because then they're going to try and make the X-Men characters in the comics more in line with the movie characters, or vice versa. Like they might already start shaping them to. They might be building background plots that they're going to start pulling in the movies later on, and they're going to be like, "Look, we set this up the whole time. Ha ha! Tricked you, fuckers."
Yeah, I bet. I mean, this has to lay the groundworks as well for the MCU in some way, and I'm just trying to figure out how this approach is gonna kind of work with an already established universe. I guess you know.
Yeah, because I bet if they introduce Moira in the X-Men MCU, she's gonna be a mutant. This very much mutant. They'll
Absolutely.
probably out the gate she'll be Moira, but then 2, 3, 4 movies in, they'll be like, "Ha! She's the mutant Moira. She was the one from the comics that we created the whole time, and we were already gonna set this up anyways. Ha! You bought our fucking books and our
You
tickets.
take that.
We've been kiting you along the whole time." I was like, "Damn, you got me, Moira." You made me like X-Men again. You made me want to see a movie that was written by you.
That's how they get you.
That is. That's how they get my money. This clever, clever girl.
Okay, so she dies, and then she lives a second life. And this second life, from what I get, is she's just a passive observer. She's watching Xavier on television, and when she watches Xavier come out as a mutant, she's like, "Oh, that's who I am." And then I believe she goes to Oxford. She goes on a plane, and it crashes, and that ends her second life. And I'm not sure if there's any other thing to take away from her second life other than she's kind of realizing that she's a mutant. Did you get anything else? Because that's all I got for the most part.
It felt like it was a very like building block life for her. Like it was one that kind of established her cohesive understanding of what she was and what was happening and how essentially it's been playing out. But she didn't wield it or use it in any type of way to shape the future yet. It was more of a reactive life almost. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's almost like she's just kind of like feeling things out a little bit, not really sure what's happening. And then once she figures it out, she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go meet Charles," and fucking dies in the process.
Oh, okay, I get it. I need to go hang out with other mutants, and then we never saw her again. She had to catch that flight that was being piloted by Amelia Earhart. But what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do about it?
Whoops! I mean, that's the same time. That was the same time. They both disappeared. No one knows what happened to her or Moira. But yeah, that was a weird life. It seemed like it was kind of one to really kind of tell us as the reader like what these powers are and where they come from and what she truly is. Because they're telling us as they are telling her, they're informing you like this is all happening because Moira's a mutant. Even
Right.
Moira gets it now, and that's why in the third life she was just like, I'm gonna dive into this one.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
ready now.
So yeah,
Fuck no, am I taking that plane?
yeah, fuck that plane. I'm not going to that plane.
I'm gonna ride boats for the rest of my life.
Yeah, never again. Never again.
The third life, Moira only traveled by taxi.
She only took a horse. That's so weird. Every time she wanted to go out, it's like, I'll grab my horse. We'll be right there in 2 to 5 hours.
It took her forever to get anywhere, but she did not die in that life by plane crash.
Plane crash, at least. Yeah.
She did get paralyzed and thrown off a horse.
By a horse. Who would have thought?
And died many years later of self-regret. She's like, at least the crash was quick. That would have been great if it was just like 6 or 7 years of her just trying to figure out how not to die too soon.
Right?
She's just constantly ending up in these weird hijinks.
It'd be like, do you watch that, what is that Netflix show, Russian Dolls? Russian Dolls with,
I've heard of it, but I've never actually checked it out. I get the premise though, where it's kind of like
it's kind of Groundhog's Day, where
Yes.
she keeps dying over and over again, and she keeps figuring out a way to get a little further each time. So it's kind of like that Tom Cruise movie,
Oh.
Edge of Tomorrow, kind of,
Yeah.
but like in a sitcom-y environment.
Yeah, I heard a lot about, like, someone said it was exactly like that, and they also informed me that there's a sequel coming out to Edge of Tomorrow, which is
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. I'm down for that because
I didn't know.
wrote. Oh, it's it's based off a manga, so it's like
Yeah, or like a graphic novel or something along that lines. Like it's something big, like actual huge story, like a lot of actual like pages and chapters to it. But I didn't know that they would ever actually make a sequel to it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I did enjoy that. That was like Groundhog's Day with aliens. But
Yeah, I really dug that movie. I love everything that Tom Cruise does when it comes to sci-fi. He
I-
knows. He knows.
I
how to do
really,
it.
I really feel like Tom Cruise. He works good in like those movies, but anything else when you get him in like a more normal character, it gets weird. Especially when you put someone next to him and you see how short he is.
Oh yeah.
He wears lifts. I'm just saying it. You heard it here first. Tom
Yep.
Cruise wears lifts.
Yep. He sure does.
Oh, but man, the Groundhog's Day premise that's baked into this whole House of X and Powers of X is just one of the weirdest like comic book like tropes that's been, or I guess television tropes that's been pulled into a comic book that actually worked. It really
It
works.
works. It works with Hickman at least. We'll
Yeah.
see how.
This time travel's messy, but it's working.
Yeah.
It's kind of. It's still.
Kind of. Yeah.
It gives me a lot of questions. The future is a very strange and scary place compared to like what some of the outcomes are, and some of the futures seem like unavoidable. So it seems like they're stuck in a paradox. But we'll see how they play it out. I mean, early on in only the first few issues, you really don't get a sense of like what the true end is and what universe and what, I guess, life you're in. So that's the nice part about issue 2 of House of X and Powers of X. Still like
Right.
that mystery. They're still like, where are we and what life is this?
Yeah,
Very
you don't know where you are in time, which is pretty interesting. And we won't know until we read the last issue.
like Fight Club. It's like, who's telling this story and which life is it and which like moment or personality, you know, like your frame of reference is so disjointed even from the narrative point.
Yeah.
You're just going to each page like, okay, wait, where does this line up? They do a good job of lining them up so you can follow the line, like you can trace the string and get back to where it all connects. But when you're just diving into it, especially in issue 2 of just House of X, you're just like, okay, how does this diagram work? What are her particular, like, what life lines up with what story? Oh, this is, you become like an archaeologist trying to like dig up like Moira's
Right.
history
Yeah.
and figure out where it fits and on his, because they use these weird infographs throughout all this series. Like, you notice that I've never
Which
seen it like
I
that in comics before.
love, by the way.
I love too.
I am loving what
That-
Hickman's doing, like with all the like iconography and all the graphs and infographics and stuff like that. Like it's necessary, especially for like a reboot like this, where you have to we have to stop doing a comic for a second, and I have to tell you stories with words.
It's like,
No
it's
pictures
legends and
needed.
blueprints
Yeah.
and like
Maps
schematics
and, legends
and like
charts.
scientific breakdowns. Yeah. Like what is a hive? What is a sentient being?
This is what I love about Hickman too, because this was like his notebooks. Like this was like just like his mad scientist notebooks. That was like, I got charts and I got like, here's the map of Krakoa and this is all this and like we got to put it in here. And they're like, all right, we'll give you a couple pages too.
He's got a couple yarn board, like conspiracy yarn boards up, where he's like,
going from like place to place. He's
this
like,
is gonna tie to her 6th life, and this is gonna tie to her 4th life. Now I'm gonna bring it all back in the 5th life. Yeah, but I like that aesthetic. I appreciate that more than almost anything that has been done like in this. This is the most, I feel it's the most innovative way to tell a comic book story. I might be missing out on something that's out there. It may have been done before, but in an X-Men story, I've never seen this kind of blueprinting done in each chapter to kind of build out the universe that he's trying to tell.
Never. Yeah.
So it fits it all together a lot better as like a cohesive story. If building blocks all fall together, you feel like, oh, I do have to read it as I go along, because it all really does start to make sense. Like everything that you weren't expecting, little small things that you go back and use the charts from like the later stories, they fit into what he was building in the earlier ones. So you understand it better. Like they bounce back and forth on like what the artificial intelligence are and how they function in the greater scale as all the stories go on. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. Okay, so she dies. She dies in a plane crash. She comes back again, and she goes, "Well, fuck this. I'm gonna go meet Charles in Oxford. I'm gonna go to Oxford. Get selected to go to Oxford. I'm gonna meet Charles." And then she finds out that he has like a god complex. Is completely turned off by Charles and mutants, and it's just like, well, fuck this. I'm going to create a cure for the mutant disease.
She met one arrogant dude, like one guy that was cocky.
Just one cocky dude. That's all it took.
Just like, I would commit genocide.
She became mutant Hitler in this life. It's great. It's like, fuck the mutants. Fuck them all.
She just had one bad day, and this dude just had some sort of superiority complex, and she didn't like that. And she was just like, you know what? I didn't like the attitude he took with me. You know what? Genocide is an appropriate response to this, and this is how I'm going to run with it. And that was how Moira spent the rest of her life. Was just she was dedicated to genocide.
Yeah,
that really went off the rails on Life 3. I'm just saying.
Like, yeah, straight up, she went off the rails all the way until the end, where the Brotherhood comes and kills Moira. Now, what is your experience with Destiny as a character? Because I'm not as familiar with Destiny. You know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah, Destiny is the empath, or not the empath, the precog. She's a precog.
Yeah, recog.
She's got precognitive abilities to predict the future and like a lot of in micro events, but usually in greater, more cryptic ways. But all of her predictions usually come true in some way or form, unless you do specific things to prevent them. But even then, some of them can't be stopped. And they use Destiny a lot as like a plot device earlier on. Like her diaries that they broke out, it was kind of one of those things where they could throw away to like weird retcons or weird things that were about to happen. And they'd use the diary as like the linking chain to be like, oh, well, see, it was foretold in Destiny's diaries. Okay, so that's why all this weird stuff's happening.
Yes, I have a vague memory of that. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Destiny essentially reads Moira's mind and kind of figures it out, right? She's like, oh, you are a mutant. You live many lives. And essentially she goes, hey, Pyro, burn her. Make sure she feels the pain in this life so she knows what to do next life. And Pyro just straight up burns her to death. And that's I love that moment where
completely vaporize, like just cauterizes her instantly and just melts her down to bone. Yeah, I honestly feel like too good of a scene, and this is why it creates this aura and this like image of Destiny and the Brotherhood in a way that they look like they have a much more deeper and darker and more effective control over the outcome of like mutant happenings and day-to-day greater picture stuff, whereas the stories that they're in, they're normally portrayed as pretty flawed, pretty bumbling, pretty unsuccessful in a lot of their ventures. But this moment here, I felt like it was like something out of like a mafia movie. Like I felt like it was like The Godfather or something.
Oh yeah,
she was like, I will always be able to prevent you, and I will always stop you, and you can do nothing to escape that. So you need to understand that you cannot be this. You can be whatever you want, but if you come to this road again, I will be here to meet you. And then she's like, and I'm not just telling you that so you could change. I want to teach you a lesson. I want you to remember this. Remember this in your next life. And then she was just like, with gusto, Pyro. And it was like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? Like, if this was the real Destiny and how Mystique and the other members of the Brotherhood worked, like I feel like the X-Men would have a tougher time. Like a lot more X-Men would be gone or dead, or like, you know, Magneto would succeeded more often. I don't know. I just feel like they wrote them too well in this scenario.
Right.
It was too dope. Like I was like, wow.
It was a badass moment. I remember this moment vividly. Just going, fuck, man.
Oh yeah, that was definitely my oh shit moment when he killed him. I was just like, damn. Hickman coming hard with the violence and the fucking just like, we're gonna be real with this one. Like this story is all about like things are gonna get gritty. I mean, sure they kind of play a weird game with how people like Moira has multiple lives and they have a weird regenerative fucking pod of mutants later on that we'll get into that. But I mean, it's still that kind of like impact of that moment of like showing viciousness to kind of just convey a message is something that I was really impressed with. Best part, hands down, the best part of the whole chapter. Like that was the shining moment of that issue.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, we'll see if they could ever rise. If Mystique and somehow if they bring back Destiny, because that's already a subplot they have to deal with. That's a loose end in the future. So, but we'll see how that plays out too.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of curious how they handle that.
It was a nice little throwaway where they like brought it up again, where they're like, "Oh, Mystique is still waiting for us to, you know, come through," and we're like, "Well, we're not gonna do that. Who cares what Mystique wants? She's B-list at best." She's here because she gets us free Wi-Fi.
She gets us free Wi-Fi.
That's always why she's on the council. The second Google is supported in this area, we can get fiber optics. Bitches out. Oh, jeez.
That's great. Okay, so she dies. She gets vaporized horribly.
Horribly, yes. Easily the most gruesome death in the whole one.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. And then we go to her fourth life, and this is where she starts dating Xavier. And essentially it plays out like X-Men. So we are to assume that between this moment where she dates Xavier and the point where the Sentinels kill her, which is how she dies in the fourth life, we are to assume that like kind of like the X-Men as we know it from the 60s and on has played out, right? Because this is where we get that kind of montage page where it goes through like from the first days to the giant-sized days to the dark days, referring to the Phoenix Five, which I found hilarious. And
Yeah.
then it referred to
Oh,
the
yeah.
days of future past. So it kind of gives you this montage of them going through life, right? And then at age 55, they created like this kind of paradise school in New York, and then the Sentinels come and eventually kill everyone there. But is that what you got from this? Like, are we to assume that like the majority of X-Men kind of played out within this page, more or less, right? What we know as X-Men has played out because Hickman is doing some great stuff here in that he's rewriting everything while still not stepping on the toes of any of the past writers, which I find interesting. Because I would say, fuck those writers, fuck that shit.
Well, yeah, if you have
Fucking
that
retcon the shit out of
power,
it.
everyone does that where they're just like, I don't care what story came before me. Like that's the thing nowadays with all people who tend to write for any series. They're just like, who cares about continuity? This is my moment to do whatever I want. And that's why many people they end pretty short and they kind of get thrown by the wayside, or some excel because of it. But I have one thing that I'm trying to clarify. So was the earlier life with the more traditional X-Men stories, that was her fourth life or fifth life?
Fourth, I believe.
That was her fourth.
Yeah, yes. Because I want to say, yeah, her fourth life was her meeting Xavier, them dating, and them kind of just going through all of the past X-Men series, and then they eventually died by the Sentinels. I'm not sure if there's anything else happened between those though, or if we're supposed to believe that anything has happened in between. Um, yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, that part I was a little confused about because it felt like there was so much missing in that area that there was, and it didn't seem like it connected it to the other life or said that it was still that was the main life that we're in right now. It's so vague about what stories actually truly intersect with what life after the fourth life. In a way, there's some you could tell, but there are a few where I'm just like, wait, is that old X-Men like mythos? Was that life, and that's
Right.
no longer the life we're on now? Or I mean, even in the end,
Exactly.
when they have the reveal of what it is and what life she's currently on, and what was like the final issue of the very end of House of X, right? That's when they
Yeah.
had the whole reveal.
Yeah.
That gives me even more questions because then I'm just like, well, wait, what's happening? When did it change? Like, when do we get to that? Where?
Right. Yeah. Like, how did we get from this life to that life? And like, could like if that's the case, if the fourth life did play out most of the X-Men as we know it, can we officially say that this is a full reboot? If that was a past life and this is now a new universe.
Is this Hickman finally catching in on what he wanted to do with Secret Wars? He's like, no, I'm getting my fucking reboot. You can't stop me. I'll do it with the X-Men. I'll do it with anything. You fucking make me write Power Pack. I'll reboot the universe.
Oh man, Power Pack.
Hickman on Power Pack. Oh, that's just got to be his follow-up series. He needs to elevate at the end of X-Men. He's going to elevate Power Pack, and he's going to swoop in and write the greatest Power Pack series ever. Power Pack being led by the one and only Franklin Richards. There you go. I'd read a Power Pack written by...
Sure, I'd take that. I take anything Franklin Richards, even with all those ridiculous stories.
Those prepubescent superheroes with their weird wannabe orphanage. Oh, it's strange. It really is. Like this retcon that we're living in right now is such a weird, murky water of like, where are we actually standing? Like, what is our foundation? I mean, I'm fine with that because they're building towards something, but at this point, it's very confusing. I like it, and I'm not angry. I'm not angry with like I'm not angry because I'm confused, but more of just like more intrigued. I'm just like, what? Tell me the universe, Hickman. I want to know. Is it when did this start? What issue and where do we fit in? Like what is this life and when is all the other Marvel stories like in line with it or is this like a weird Elseworld that's going to tie back into the other universe or her other lives somehow? Like at one point, is Moira McTaggert from like the Life 6 gonna find a way to universe travel to Life 5 and like kill that Moira McTaggert?
Yeah, see, that's what I'm afraid slash curious about in the future, how they're going to play this out and how, like, and not her necessarily, but anyone go from one of her lives to the next and like warn her, change things, etc. Um, I don't know. I don't know. And
Yeah,
that's the kind of
it's got
gray
room.
area.
It's got room to do whatever it wants. It has room to fail or succeed. We'll see. We will definitely see, because it's never really concluded by the final issue of House of X or Powers of X. That's just kind of like you get a current understanding of what's going on and where she's at with what she's trying to do, but there is no like actual top off of like, okay, well now we get it. We get the world and we know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
I think we're just as far away from that as we were in maybe all the way up to issue 4. Like now we get a lot of information, but once you hit 4 on, it's still just like no reward. You're just like, I have more questions. I have more questions. And then now we've gotten into the single issues of like X-Men and Marauders and all that, and I have even more questions.
I have more questions, and we're not going to get those answers for a while.
He's
Which
got
is
to meet us eventually. This is getting out
yeah,
of hand.
yeah. That's Hickman's thing. He likes the slow tease. He likes to give you a nice tug for a little bit, and then make a sandwich and leave you waiting.
Yeah. I can be happy if he ends it in a way where the quote unquote dark years of the X-Men are a different universe entirely, and that never happened in this universe. I think that's all I really want out of this, is like if we could just ebb out, maybe the last 10 years of X-Men writing. Okay, I'll go less than that. I'll even say like maybe the last like 7
Like House of
and a
M
half
on.
years. Oh yeah, all the way up to, well, no, House of M, that's too far back. House of M all the way through like Messiah Complex, Endangered Species, Second Coming, all that stuff is fine. I don't mind that.
Okay.
I feel like that's the culmination of like everything that Chris Claremont set up back in like the 80s and 70s, like going forward. Like
Right.
he brought out some stuff that like didn't really get touched upon for like 20 years, but when it did, it was great.
Mhm.
And then Disney got the license around like late 2000s, and then really started taking control in like the teens, like around like 2011. Whenever
2012.
Yeah, when Avengers vs. X-Men came out, that was when you saw Disney's like movie arm really pushing hard on the comics. And then from then on out, it was just bad. It was bad. You just can't. No one likes the Inhumans. They tried to
No
make the
one
Inhumans
likes
mutants.
the
Doesn't work.
Inhumans.
I've told you this hundreds of times. The
Yes.
Inhumans are blue bloods. They're aristocrats. They're the 10%.
They are.
They're like the 1% even. They're just like a couple, like 400 of them living on like the dark side of the moon at
Of the moon,
sometimes.
yeah.
Or weird. They're like just nestled away in the Kree Empire or wherever they are. They bounce around. But they're just aristocrats and like royalty, and they're not the average people with like random mutant powers. They're like demigods. So like trying to make the Inhumans relatable is not ever going to work. Like you can't just sub in the Inhumans for the mutants, because the mutants have like a natural relatability to the average reader, and it works. That's why the X-Men is so amazing, because you can jump into it and you can put your palette on any of it. You can embrace any of it. You can find a common ground with any of the stories. So even if there's a larger cast of characters, there's enough relatability or enough to pull you into it and want to know more about even just them. Like there isn't that in Inhumans. I mean, you can't make every story about Lockjaw. Everybody loves Lockjaw, but
Everyone
I mean,
loves Shockjaw.
I can't. I wouldn't read like a 20-issue series about Lockjaw. It would be pretty like then he teleported, and then he ate, and then he teleported.
I actually did read because there is a Lockjaw series. I read up
Oh.
to issue 5, and it was pretty awesome.
Was it a
because-
mini series, or was it like a legit like?
I don't know. I don't know how long the run went. I read up to issue 5 though, and it's just him literally teleporting around. Is like, oh, Lockjaw, what the fuck you doing here? Oh shit! Like he's almost like the fucking Sword of Gryffindor, where he just shows up where he's needed, type of thing. Where it's just like, hey, what are you doing here? Oh shit! we're getting attacked. Lockjaw, help!
It's
And
so
that's
weird.
every issue. It's every issue.
Yeah.
He just runs into he runs into Howard the Duck, I think, at one point.
That
He
makes
runs into
sense.
he runs into like every random like person. It's kind of weird. He runs into like Adam Brashear. He runs into what's the one gay superhero? Not Iceman, not a mutant. He's gay. He's like he's always on the couch these days because he hates life.
I don't know. I don't. North Star is the only one I can think of, but no.
Star. God, it's gonna kill me. What? I'll think of it later and get back.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was literally the whole series, and I'm just like, well, this is fun but pointless, more or less.
Yeah. I really feel like Lockjaw just kind of has his purpose as like a plot device and he's usually like a chauffeur to get people around. There's always like the Inhumans are in a situation, things get messed up, and they're like, "What do we do?" And then all of a sudden, Lockjaw shows up and is like, "I'll save you." And they're like, "I think this Lockjaw was here because we got written into a corner there." It's great to have just a random teleporter that you can have show up at any time. You write yourself into like locational corners where you're like, "How would we get them from here to here?" Oh shit, Lockjaw could do it. Gone.
Yeah.
Just have him pop out and just never saw him again. Oh, but I really wouldn't be able to read like a whole like 100 issue series, like a Lockjaw annual. Like who wants to read a Lockjaw annual?
No. I'm not doing that. I tapped out after 5, so that gives you an idea.
And that's the best the Inhumans have to offer. And when that's the best you have to offer, you really can't usurp the X-Men. Like they just have too much character and too much relatability. There's too much humanity and all that. You're never gonna find it there. So honestly, like now we've returned to this era where the X-Men are actually being written in a way where they're not being held back, they're not being hamstrung or kind of reeled in. They're just, all right, here we go. I mean, we're getting even New Mutants. Like there was a while where the Marvel mandated like can't make New Mutants because if we create a New Mutant, then Fox technically could use it. So they had to start vetting. Like they did loopholes. Like I think somewhere back in 2014, they came out with a series where they introduced a race of like proto mutants. So they're technically not mutants proper. So they were allowed to write them without Marvel being or Fox being able to use them in the movies. And they introduced like these weird characters. One of them was like Gabriel Shepard, and he was like beyond Omega level. It was ridiculous. He's like, I'm proto mutant, and I kind of can just do whatever I want. It's very strange, but that's just an example of like what they had, the loops and the weird roads they had to go down to circumvent giving any ability to be used in a Fox movie with still writing an X-Men comic. And that was really strange. And I think now we're kind of finally past that. And that's why this Hickman stuff has been great. And even the end of this issue, I felt like, wow, this felt like an older X-Men comic.
It does. It really does feel like the old days, and that's what excites me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. But I mean, Life 4 in general was pretty much like a nice, like you're like, okay, that's a nice like preview of like what's gonna happen. It seems like things are not gonna end well, and then
yeah.
And then you transition to the next Life, and it kind of picks off in a weird way, or picks up in a weird way, where she's just like, well, I'm gonna take more of an active hand in just trying to stop the mutants from getting fucked over, like attacking it at the source. Like we get like a Punisher-esque version of Moira.
So that's actually Life. There's a Life. There's a Life in between that. The one where she becomes radicalized and starts killing people.
Is that
the one you're thinking of?
Fifth
So
Life, or is it...
that's gonna be Life 7.
Or 7.
And then Life 6, we don't know, at least in this issue. And then Life 5, what happens is she becomes she radicalizes Xavier, and essentially it plays out the same as Life 4. More or less. But instead of them creating a school, they create like a compound and a military complex, and it ends the same exact way. The Sentinels kills them.
Yeah, it turns into like, it kind of reminded me of like Bishop's kind of future. Like it had that kind of feeling.
Yes.
Where they were more radicalized mutants fighting against like it felt like kind of a Terminator-esque. And I liked that one as well, but man, like when she became radicalized in her own way and just became like a mercenary, that was like a weird side of her. That was more like the movie version in was it First Class, where she was like a CIA agent. She was like an operative. Yeah. She's like a government agent. Like that's what it felt like. It was a nice nod to. So maybe First Class is secretly
like the advent of this storyline. That'd be great.
That's her 6th life. Is it X-Men First Class? That would be a weird tie-in. But yeah, that was a very interesting one. But doubling back to the one where they had that in between life before we actually got to that point. The mystery behind what's going on with that and what that actually is very strange. Like what purpose that holds. Like is the relevance of that been overwritten at this point, or is there some more information in that life later on that we're gonna get after
Wait, you're
House of
referring to
House?
Life 4?
Yeah. Oh no.
Life 5, where
Yes.
okay, yeah. So yeah, we weren't given too much information on that life. We just know that she radicalized Charles a little bit, and they formed the mutant nation Faraway. It's supposed to be like man's evolutionary betters, and then it was a precursor to Krakoa. And then because mutants kind of weren't ready for humans, so they isolated themselves, kind of like how this ends. But again, the Sentinels come to destroy them. But within this life, she finds out that Trask, Bolivar Trask, is the creator of the Sentinels, and that leads us into Life 7, where she goes crazy and starts killing some Trasks.
Yeah, she goes and she's like, well, I'm just. She's really good at trying to eliminate particular bloodlines of things. I
Yeah,
definitely noticed that's probably a mutant power of hers as well. Like trying to just eradicate a
just
family line.
just the
Like
bloodlines. Yeah,
first she's like, I'm gonna cure all the mutants. Now she's like, I'm gonna cure all the Trasts with my bullets.
with my
It's just wow. And some of them are brutal too. Like some of them are just like they don't even know. Like they're just
yeah, straight up. I think
she's
she kills a couple babies, right?
and then she's like popping out of bushes and like murdering people just out of nowhere. Like some of them they're far away, and then some of them are just like she just. I think she killed someone with like a wrist wire, like a groat, like in one of the panels. She's just choking out someone from the shadows. So it's like not only was she going around killing people, but she was like really stealthy and like really just brutal about it. Like she was just killing with no remorse. I'm interested to see like the backstory in this one. I'd like a little like I know they'll never do it. They probably won't. I mean, maybe they'll reference it, but if they did a standalone one shot
That'd be a
about
great
this
one
life,
shot, actually. Yeah.
oh yeah, and there probably would be like very little mutant reference or any X-Men, but it would be actually pretty cool because some of those panels were pretty intriguing. Like she had to get through something to get to those points, and to be that badass. Like, and plus, it would be cool to see all the X-Men's like kind of like humans rogues gallery, like one by one get picked off like that.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that would be a nice little like playback to the characters that have kind of like we could be like, oh, this is Donald Pierce at one point trying to prepare things, and like you see him getting ready to launch a certain like incursion against the X-Men, and you're like, oh,
Mhm.
I know this story, I know what's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden she shows up and kills him, and that never happens, and you're like, oh shit, she just changed history. Like that would be a cool just one shot to read by itself. But
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen.
No. Maybe. You never know.
And maybe in like a flashback they'll give a reference or two, but I don't think they would ever do a full story, like a
No.
full issue.
Well, they are going to do that untitled Moira McTaggart story that might touch on it a little bit.
Wait, they're doing like a standalone series?
It's supposed to be after. It's supposed to be Dawn of X, like phase 2 in like early 2020. It's just referred to as an untitled Moira McTaggart series. There's no name for it, no nothing yet.
This is gonna be like Moira McTaggart issue 1.
Be weird, right? It just gives you this in between. I mean, it would make sense. There's still so many things that I need to know, but at the same time, like her alone is gonna be a tough one.
It was just one of those things. Like I mean, she's a cool character in her own right, and her mutant powers now give her like enough. And in these
Sure.
stories, they get these backgrounds. You see how badass she becomes. So you're like, yeah, I would read that. I do read that. But to hear those words out loud, it's like Moira McTaggart. It's like the first time I found out that there was like a Jimmy Olsen like issue 1 comic. You're just
There's
like,
a
wait.
Jimmy Olsen comic? Wait.
It's like a side comic in a Superman comic, right? Like it's like in the back, right? And they're like, no, it's a full issue. He's on the cover. It's just Jimmy Olsen, and I'm like, what?
Why?
Who was just in it for like wondering? I always hated when he was around. I was like, get out of the way, Jimmy. Like, you're blocking
Jimmy,
me, man. I want to see what's happening. You're in front of the fight. I don't want your commentary on the fight. I can just watch the fight. Like, get out of here, Jimmy. So it was real strange. It was a bizarre thing to read, but now that I know that they're going hard about this, I guess her character is definitely going to play an interesting role. Especially what we find out at the end with their weird little plan of like, oh man, we're gonna set something in motion and then we're gonna release Moira on the world. You just wait.
Just
Moira,
you
the
wait.
return.
Just you wait.
Release the pod. You cue the Terminator music, and Moira rises out, and she's like, "I'm back." Oh, she has like a robot eye, or she has the cable eye, the little like sparkly
Yes,
cable eye. She's
yes.
like, "I'm back." I'm here to recreate really weird time paradoxes. Are you ready? I'm like, she has the new cable. Oh, oh man, I can't wait till we talk about it.
I'm
Young
excited
Cable.
to talk about that story.
Yeah.
Oh, Young Cable.
Oh,
Don't get me started on Young Cable.
well, with
That- That's
that's for a different podcast.
that's for a different podcast.
Oh man.
But one thing I really, really loved about this storyline is that she dies again at the end of this. She kills all the Trasks, and she still dies by Sentinels. And she comes to the conclusion that machine AI, artificial intelligence, is not something that man creates, but is just an evolutionary trait. It's going to happen no matter what. And I found that pretty fascinating because I've always believed that myself. Like people are always talking about like, oh, you can't. What happens when the machines come or whatever? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm just like, it's gonna happen regardless. I have always seen it as evolution, not as just a technological advancement.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophical subtext and a lot of deep, profound evolutionary quandaries that are actually addressed in these issues of X-Men being written by
Right?
Hickman. Like there are some things that you're just like, oh wow, like he really does have like kind of a very provocative but profound way of acknowledging that we are heading towards a technological monarchy or autocracy or oligarchy. You could put it in any way, but it's going to be a technocratic version of that, of whatever future we have. There is going to be a natural symbiosis that we're going to have with technology. I mean, may that destroy us? May that change us in a way that Hickman's writing in kind of showing the future here in that kind of way? I don't know, but he's actually touching on something that is actually something that you don't really hear people acknowledge. Like there isn't anyone out there going saying like, hey, like eventually we'll go back to sticks and stones. I think if we ever got back to sticks and stones, we
Mhm.
would hit this huge point of technological immersion and symbiosis that then we would wipe ourselves out. But afterwards, I don't know if anyone's left over, maybe they would go back to sticks and stones. But that technological bump, that peak, that high water point is gonna happen. Like we're gonna hit that eventually. There's nothing we could do to stop it. And Hickman's laying it out right here, like saying, even if you try to do it in every life you have, eventually someone's going to develop a form of technology that's going to become weaponized, and an artificial intelligence will be bred from it, and some sort of mass unification or culling or dystopian future is going to come up of it. It's an inevitability. It's pretty profound. I have to keep saying that that's what it is. It really is profound. Like
It
you don't get
is.
that kind of writing in comics usually. At
You
least
really
not
don't.
comics like this. Not like something, just like a normal X-Men story arc.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Hickman. He plants these seeds of like kind of like modern day narratives and modern day storytelling of like what we are going through as humans and like kind of showing you like, hey, this is going to happen no matter what.
Exactly. Like it's really similar to what you got from the older X-Men stories, the things that kind of focused on a narrative that addressed modern day issues. The last like 10 years or less than 10 years, but the last like 7 or 6 years of X-Men, like they didn't really focus on the weird greater narrative of like what are we as a society trying to deal with? What are the qualms and the woes, and how is that being bred out and explained in the X-Men comic? We didn't get any of that, but you did get that back in the day with Claremont. You did get that, and even with Stan Lee, because I mean, they introduced with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they introduced the whole Sentinel concept and how they were hunting the mutants and the persecution. Like there was a lot of actual iconic lifetime allegories being written in those comics that you just didn't have for a while recently, and now we're getting it again. We're getting an actual like deep like modern day philosophy, because you could go back and read those problems and they don't always relate because the times have changed, whereas
Exactly.
this is a modern issue, a contemporary issue that we are actually getting like organically brought up in the comic. It wasn't even ham-fisted too. He wasn't even like the woes of technology. It was just like, no, this is what we're progressing to. You
Yeah.
have to acknowledge this. We cannot ignore it. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful. It really is.
It is. See, one thing I love about X-Men is it's always been about uh a new species kind of coming in and being the more advanced species, and like what happens when two species exist, right? You know, we have humans and we got the Homo superior, right? The mutants, right? Coexisting at one time, and we see how these struggles kind of come up, how humanity kind of deals with it. And what I like about what Hickman's doing is, certainly we've seen this with back in the day with the old Sentinel stories about AI and the Sentinels kind of taking over, but Hickman's really, really delving into the idea that this isn't necessarily about humans and mutants. It's more about mutants and humans as one versus the artificial intelligence. And the artificial intelligence in this case is the higher species kind of taking over these mutants and human lives in many ways. So seeing that kind of shift, and the it's still the same themes, right? The same motifs, same themes that we've seen throughout all of X-Men, right? But he's shifting it into a very, very interesting, like artificial intelligent kind of singularity approach to this, which I find fascinating, because it's no longer about humans and mutants. It's more about humans, mutants, but wait, there's AI as well.
Yes, and that's always been the trio, or you could say the tango of the trio for X-Men, because there's always been this struggle between the X-Men and the mutants. But then when the AI got introduced, it became the symbiosis of the three. There was always the humans that agreed with the mutants that tried to work with them, and then there are the humans that didn't, and they focus more on the technology, because the more human adversaries of the X-Men tend to be technologically focused. Like very rarely do you have an outright human adversary to the mutants that has superpowers. They're normally cyborgs in a way, like Daniel Pierce, for example. Like, dude's just a cyborg, and he's like one of the most like, or oh gosh, Bison, yeah.
Well,
Baston, oh gosh, I want to call him Bison because I'm thinking of Street
no.
Fighter.
Yeah, no, not
he had that red.
That's the other. That's a different man.
Bastion, I think was his name or something. But he was like, he melded with Nimrod or something. It was during the X-Men story arc of like Second Coming or something.
Yes,
they had this huge war. Bastion, yeah, I think sounds right. But yeah, he was also another. He was literally a melding of the Nimrod and like a human. And there's just so many of this like technology versus X-Men, technology and humans versus X-Men, humans and X-Men working together to fight technology. It's a back and forth and this weird struggle. And it's been there ingrained over the years, but Hickman is like bringing it out. Like he's focusing on, it's like this is a key factor or motif, like you said, that's been there, a part of the storyline, and it's really important that we flush it out into like a way that shows the full spectrum of it, like the full, like he's like, we're going to the end of the time with this bitch. I'm going to show you how this plays out in the very end when we get galactic with it in the later lives.
Oh yeah, it's great. I love it. I'm loving it. I'm loving everything about this. Cool.
Definitely gets hairy from there, but then you go into the next life. That's the one, if I'm correct, is when the transitions, she tries to be like, all right, it didn't work with Charles. Let's see what Magneto can do.
Yes, so that's the next life.
Yes,
Moira just goes, fuck Xavier. That's not gonna work. He's too nice. Let's see what Magneto has to do about this.
I felt kind of bad. Like it was like a slapstick moment. Like then Magneto, sometimes he feels like Team Rocket, like to the X-Men, where he's like, "Oh, I've been defeated by you again."
Yeah.
And this life had that moment of like, Magneto fucked up again. Everyone be.
Yeah.
But then that one actually had like all the Avengers in it, if I'm correct.
It was the Avengers because Spider-Man was in it. I think Captain America was in it. It was a pretty cool panel. It was like a silly life. The whole thing felt silly, but the panel itself was amazing. It's like Magneto falling, and then like all the Avengers and X-Men kind of like attacking at once, and I was like, oh, that's badass. But yeah, it's kind of a silly like way to go out, right? They were both they were defeated by the X-Men and the Avengers.
Yeah, I think at one point there's like Colossus was like tackling him or something, and I was just like, what is happening? It's like, oh, you know what it felt like? This is the best example, and I showed it to you before. Remember that old Marvel Shorts clip where it was like the old Marvel cartoons where it was like Fantastic Four had like, instead of Human Torch, it was that robot. And I remember like they are Reed outsmarted
Yeah,
Magneto.
bro.
Where he like used wood and he tricked him and he's like, it's made out of wood, Magneto. You can't do anything. And he's like, I can't believe you tricked me, Reed.
You
And the
tricked
cops handcuffed him with a metal handcuff and
metal
just
handcuff.
carried him away.
It's
That's
so
what that panel embodies that moment where it's like Magneto had his chance, Moira believed in him, she put all her fate behind him, and he's like standing outside of like fucking the Pentagon or something, or like the white I think it's something like Congress or something, the congressional building, and he's like, I'm gonna win, and it's just like, no, you don't, Magneto, you lose.
yeah.
He's like, oh, foiled by the works of the X-Men and the Avengers yet again.
Again, no.
You tricked me, Reed. He sounded so sad when he said that. I was felt sorry for him. I was like, oh, Magneto.
Magneto, come on.
He tricked you. You gotta be stronger than that. You're like he's such a badass in the comics. So like when I saw this scene, I was just like, oh, come on. But then again, it's like that's kind of how it always played out for him over the years. Like Hickman was like, I'm gonna touch that. That's gonna happen. Magneto by himself just can't do it. He's awesome. He's dominating. He has a very booming, jovial presence, but he's just not. He can't cut it himself. And I guess even with Moira on point, like it didn't seem like she really. I couldn't really tell like what her impact was. She just was like, you know what, Magneto, stop waiting to take over the world and just do it today.
That's kind of what I got. Just like she was like
Sped it up, like
in his ear the whole time, just like, hey, it'd be a good day to take over the world.
Why don't you bring down the humans today, Magneto? Get on out there. Come on, buddy. Do it today. He's like, I don't want to. And she's like, come on. I made you a bowl of cereal. Get out there and conquer that world.
You know what I hate? Metal. I hate it all.
I heard they were going to try and outlaw metal. Did you hear about that, Magneto? And he's like, oh, no. They can't do that. Why don't you get out there and get him? Stop him. He's like, oh, no.
My metal.
You're going to replace it all with wood? They've been talking to Reed.
No. Oh, no. Have they been talking to Reed Richards?
How dare...
Once they get the cuffs on me, it's over.
That was a quick one, though. That one kind of flew through pretty fast. It had Magneto's, like, it didn't even hype it. It just kind of gave us that moment of, like, she's going to back him, and it failed.
Yeah, that is literally my notes right now. It's Moira joins Magneto, defeated by Avengers, X-Men. That's all I got.
I mean, it was the more, like, you know, down to earth, family friendly finish. Like it had like a very for TV end where it was just like, they defeat him and it ended and everyone went off. No violence, no like genocide, no wiping out of all the mutants. Like it was just like they busted Magneto and he's now doing 9 to 5 in like a slammer or something.
Yeah, that's funny. All right. So after that, we go to the next life, and the next life's interesting because you know what life this is. So she goes, fuck Xavier. He's too nice. Fuck Magneto. He's too militant.
And inept.
Apparently.
But yeah.
And then she's like, fuck this. I'm going to ally with Apocalypse. What did you think when you first saw this?
Well, let's point this out. She didn't only ally with Apocalypse. She became like a quasi-Apocalypse. Like, like that panel showed her, and she was like doing the laziest like Apocalypse cosplay I'd ever seen. She just like put on an Apocalypse like costume and like painted her face, and then she's just like, I'm Apocalypse Junior. I wanted to see her like bulk out and just become like a ripped version of like, you know, like how they started drawing like She-Hulk for the last couple of years, where she's all bulked out like regular Hulk. Yeah. I wanted to see like fucking like 8-foot Moira like just chilling there. Which how? Like I don't even understand how she even like. Oh well, okay. I mean, if you break it down using the X-Men logic, the mythos, he probably like showed her the celestial technology and was like, here, come into this spaceship. It's going to retrofit you with like celestial technology and you're going to be like godlike. Here you go. And she's like, oh, cool. I believe it.
I imagine he made her a horseman, right? That's my like kind of go-to. That's what I assumed.
She didn't look like a horseman though. Like
she didn't.
Only in the sense of like I guess they stuck to it in the original Horsemen of the Apocalypse, or Apocalypse's Horsemen. They turn blue when they turn, right? When they turns them into horsemen.
Yeah.
Like the first original ones, because I remember Angel became Archangel and he was blue.
Blue,
And
yeah.
that was like an outcome. And the other weird, like most forgettable horsemen in the history of horsemen, the ones that were, it's like you had Archangel and then the other guys is what I called it.
The other guys.
Because like later on, you had like dope horsemen where you're just like, oh, Hulk is a horseman of Apocalypse, Wolverine is a horseman of Apocalypse. This is dope. And then you're like, well, who were the first gen ones? They must have been crazy. And you're just like, no one knows or cares.
I'm glad you said that because I was like, I know Archangel, and that's all I remember.
Oh yeah, and I've known them before because I love the Age of Apocalypse series. I've read them, but every time I read them, like I forget them because they're not pragmatic, and nor are they ever referenced after like the first arc of any original Apocalypse arc. And even the alternate universes, like later on, they're not the fucking original Horsemen anymore. They're gone and like replaced by people who like you want to see, like actually give a shit about, you know.
Yeah.
So when they do that though, like they do turn blue, but later on they don't. They just take on a different appearance. Like they change in a unique way. Like or they change in a way that kind of is reminiscent to what horsemen they are. So like you know if they become like a horseman of like war, they become more warlike in their design, like
Right.
spikier and like more deadly looking and that kind of stuff. Where she didn't. She just was like, I look exactly like Apocalypse. I have the same like gear, like the same little weird robotic tendrils hanging out of her arm, like, and she's same face paint.
Yeah.
Archangel didn't do that. Like he looked kind of like him, but he wasn't like identical. At least not until later on when he did turn into Apocalypse, which was that story was weird. I don't even know if any of that stuff still counts. I liked it, but
I vaguely remember that.
it was X-Force. It was the whole they called it the
Oh,
Apocalypse
yeah.
Seed or something or something I can't remember, but it was a really good arc where it had Archangel stepping up and going like, well, technically, if Apocalypse doesn't succeed or if he is defeated, the Horseman of Death can step up and become the new Apocalypse. Like that was the weird mythos they flushed out, and like he ended up having children with one of the other horsemen, and then they had a whole story arc called the Apocalypse Twins, and it was really weird. Dude, the Apocalypse Twins make their own Horsemen of Death, and they do look blue like that, and they do kind of take on that armor. So now that I think about it,
you're
maybe
right.
maybe she is because they bring back the Sentry as a fucking Horseman of Death, and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. The Sentry's back, and then he flies away, never to be seen again until like 10 years later.
That's
When
funny.
they bring it back, and then send him away again, and we won't see him for another 8 years. We're in a loop with that guy. I love the Sentry, but he is the weirdest like hero plot device that they will throw away and then
Right? And then
And
they just forget about it for years.
Because
It's so
that's like
weird.
that's written into the plot of the Sentry. Like people
Right.
forgot he was a superhero.
Because
They
he was supposed
created-
to be the first superhero, right?
Yeah, or one of the first. Like he's created from a serum that is a part of Weapon X. That's like a super serum that's like 100 times more powerful than Captain America's super soldier serum. So it's ridiculous. The dude's got a power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, and it's like, okay, this is too powerful. Like no one can beat him, and it's like we get that, and that's why we're gonna send him into the galaxy. And you're not gonna hear about him or deal with him until we need him for a plot device. Because if we kept him around, he could just defeat everything. It's just they made him even stronger in the last issue. It's just like, oh wait, actually no, I'm wrong. They brought him back. He's fighting. Oh, I told you about that. He's actually back, and he's
Yeah.
fighting the agents of Wakanda or something.
Okay. Yeah, you were telling me about that.
Yeah, they got Janet Van Dyne and freaking Mangrill or some other dude and like what else? Gosh, Black Panther. They're fighting the Sentry because I'm like that's the crew that can beat the Sentry. All these humans
Weird. And this
and a
is
gorilla
him,
dude.
this is him in like Super Saiyan form too. Super Saiyan Sentry.
Yeah, I think he's the same Sentry. I think it's the Void
The
Sentry.
Void Sentry. Yeah.
The Sentry Complete or Sentry. What is it? Sentry.
Sentry.
Oh Jesus! Scratch that one from the name list. But yeah, the weird apocalypse like process is one of those things that they never really flesh out too much. They kind of touch on it in other comics, and I know there's probably something out there that really goes into depth about it. Though how canon that probably is up for debate. But yeah, I guess maybe she is a horseman in this. Maybe she's like the Horseman of Death. I don't know. They show, I think, at least a couple other horsemen on there. I don't know. If
We
you have
do-
it up,
We
If you
do
have it up in front of
see
you,
a couple of people. I don't have it up in
is there four
front of
including
me.
her?
There's not 4. I think there's actually
Because if there's 4 including
because
her, if as a matter of fact, actually, hold on.
let me see. Hold on.
Yeah, because if there's 4 including her, then that would make complete sense that she's Horseman of Death, and that I just overlooked that. I just remember like being too focused on like, oh my god, what is happening in this timeline?
It's just her and her cosplay outfit.
There's no other Horseman with her at all.
No, there are. They're in shadows though. You don't see them.
How many do you at least?
There's 4. There's 4.
Okay,
But they're
so
they're all in darkness. Like
Oh, okay.
you could tell Moira and Apocalypse, but you can't tell the other ones.
Okay, so she's not a horseman then. She's just like some cancellieri in Apocalypse's gang.
I guess, yeah.
She's like she's Mama Apocalypse. Like what is it?
Bomb Apocalypse.
What is it? Miss Apocalypse? How they do it in comics? Or is
Oh
like
yeah.
Apocalypse Woman? Apocalypse Gal? Oh, Apocalypse Girl.
Apocalypse. Oh, I didn't realize that's just a dead Captain America just hanging out right next to Apocalypse right there. That's funny.
What?
Yeah, it's just like Captain America's hanging out dead in the corner. I didn't even
Oh
notice
wow!
that. Yeah,
I totally missed that. Holy
it's
crap!
Captain America and Miss Marvel just dead.
Man, yeah, because I haven't jumped to that issue since it came out.
It's
Like
been a
that
while.
was
Yeah.
and that was like like a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, and we're. Oh, go ahead.
But I was saying like that was a good issue, but that's definitely something I'm gonna have to go back and check out because that's pretty dope.
Because it's so dense. This is like the kind of like, well, this is everything you need to know about Moira.
Yeah, it was a fat like fucking up to date issue of like what has Moira been doing with her lives.
Yeah.
This issue will get you up to speed for the most part, while still leaving you with plenty of questions.
Yes. And in this life, we know all it says is she once failed again. And we find out in Powers of X 2 or 3, they actually play out her death, right? In that?
In the isn't the big twist in that where it's like they show you at the end that her
It was her the whole time. Whoever this person we are referring to that we're being vague about. Yes.
But wasn't the other twist also about like how they used that memory in that time to try to take advantage of that? Wasn't that like the follow up like after Apocalypse fights Nimrod, right?
Yes.
Like that's what's shown in that issue too. Like the first fight,
Yes.
the
Because
first time he's fighting Nimrod and then, like she's with him, right?
Yeah.
But wait, isn't that kind of changed retcon already? Even like because when they reveal what happens at the end of that storyline, she wasn't there fighting with him, right?
No,
he fought Nimrod alone.
He fought Nimrod alone, so it is kind of a I guess a visual retcon, not
Maybe
really a story retcon.
They were alluding that it was like a visual representation of like them fighting what is like a losing battle against Nimrod in general, but that's
kind of what
not
I'm getting.
Apocalypse's actual death, which they go into
overrun.
later on. Yeah.
Like Apocalypse is like fisting Nimrod through the stomach while like a bunch of other Sentinels are just kind of overrunning them. So it could be like a metaphor for their demise.
Which I'll get to my rant when we get to that part when he actually does fight Nimrod proper and they play out that fight. I got some beef with that, but we'll save that for that part.
Okay.
I got some beef with that. You already know it.
You talking about just
Apocalypse
losing to Nimrod?
I think Rob's take on it, like how Rob broke it down, and I was like, yes, like he gets it 100%. Like he breaks down the fight, and he's like, let me tell you what's up with Apocalypse. And then I was like, yes, see, this is what I already knew as well. And I'm like, why didn't they get this? Like this was that. I'll get to it when we get to that, but that writing had some beef.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
They had to jump some hoops to get to.
And I feel
narrative,
it. I feel what they're doing. I get it. I get
what they're doing, but I'm just like, come on. That's not gonna happen.
You gotta write if you gotta put Apocalypse in your story, you cannot do it lightly. You can't just like here's Apocalypse and he's one of the B team.
Yeah.
Get him out there. He's gonna wrangle. I'll fight him back.
Yeah.
Apocalypse smash.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. He felt like a whole character, but we'll touch on that. It's nice that this one kind of really showed more like actually like getting involved in a cool way and like really breaking out. But yeah.
Indeed. So then they die, which we'll find out later.
With Captain America.
And that leads us to the last life, Moira's last life. And this is where the first issue of House of X, issue number 1, comes into play. That first page where Moira just comes up to Xavier at the World's Fair and says, "Read my mind." And Xavier gets everything he needs. And this is kind of where the story takes off from here. Yeah. Other than that, she dies. She straight up goes to Xavier and just tells him to read her mind. And we're left with Xavier knowing everything that happened in Moira's lives, including the sixth life, which we do not know yet because
Yeah, that's the weird one.
yeah, Hickman chose to hide, which is weird because I expected like we all expected like what's the sixth life, what's the sixth life, and ultimately you're just like, ooh, okay, that played out interesting, but did he have to tease that to the end? I feel like he could have told that in chronological order, and I could still be like, ooh, okay, I would still get the same reaction. I feel.
It was a weird like trump card or not even trump card, like kind of a twist to sit on, like to play close to the chest. Like he didn't really have to play that one so close to the chest at the end. He could have just let it out earlier on and kind of built from there. Like you said, chronologically, it would all play out in a way where it still fits in the story because these time frames are broken up so just completely where you can put them back together and look at them individually and put them back in wherever you want and play them out, that it's fine where you could just tell us the whole story without having to like, oh, hey, by the way, this is more about this other life. And you're just like, well, we already get the main story now. So this extra little trick at the end was not too impactful, but still nice. I appreciate it. It was a good nod. I mean, overall, especially this part in general, like how they approached it, he was like, all right, I built all the groundwork. Now let's get you up to speed. And he's just like, and this is how I'm going to do it. Moira, have Charles read your brain. All right, good. Everyone's up to speed. It's like you remember in Beer Fest where like Manfield died and then they replaced him with his brother. Yeah. And he's like, I'm Manfield too, or like, can we just call you Landfill? And he's like, yeah. And it's like we can skip that whole like awkward getting to know each other phase and just get right into be a friend. Yeah, it's like it totally felt like that moment. So I mean, kudos for Hickman for using that kind of little like, I guess you could say it's kind of a trope to like speed things up.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like he watched way too much Christopher Nolan while he was writing this. He was like, ooh, I'll just wait till the end to tell this. Nolan!
Moira was Ra's al Ghul's daughter the whole time. And by that point, you just don't care. Like, what? Who give a shit? I can't get over Bane's funny voice. I hope that Charles, when he talks into people's minds, it sounds like that.
Right? Like he could create any voice he wants in their minds, right? Why not? Mm-hmm. He just goes, Moira, you need to eat more fiber.
Must connect the mutant. You dork. Yeah, it is definitely a weird plot device to hold on to certain things like that till the end, but you know, hey, it didn't sabotage the story, so that's fortunate.
So that's good, but you know, every time, like I think Nolan kind of really fucked with the whole time thing, because every time I see someone playing with time now, I get mad. Instead of like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's a fun little thing you did there. I get mad these days. I'm just like, fucking just tell me the story chronologically. I blame Nolan.
Well, Tarantino always had a way of doing it back in the day that was fine, and even now he still implements it. But with Nolan, it hedged too much on like the big reveal is always going to be at the end, and it's usually like subseded by what you would consider a big enough reveal. So by that point, you're already like, oh, okay, I'm already. Like, he needs to quit when he's ahead sometimes. I feel like he waits way too long. It's like, they could have been, like, going... Like, the credits scene where they showed Batman even in the final Batman movie that he ran with. Like, Dark Knight Rises. Mm-hmm. That was even worse. Like, I was just like, stop it, Nolan. Your twists are terrible. You're waiting to the end to reveal these, like... And then it's, like, credits. And you're like, Batman was still alive. Like, oh, come on. You could have ended it way more poetically. Like leaving him dead is just more poetic. Him getting tea out in the middle of public, a known billionaire out getting tea in public is not attracting. That's supposed to be dead is not attracting any attention. All right, sure, whatever. No.
Nolan.
Right.
All right. So she reads, or Charles Xavier reads, Moira's mind. Charles looks very stunned, and that concludes Power. What are we on? House of X issue number 2, and each issue ends with a quote. This quote ends with, "I am here. I have always been here," and that quote has been by Moira. And that is it for issue number 2. What did you think of this issue?
Well, overall, like we broke down pretty consistently, it was a good like try to get the premise of her different lives and the reincarnation up to speed issue. Like it was a good, pretty much, I guess you could say, linking issue to the other ones to really get you excited for the story.
Mhm.
But aside from the really fucking hardcore Destiny payoff, like that was probably the best part of the whole issue. Everything else kind of felt, I wouldn't say like underwhelming, but I would say it was more of just like, okay, this is good information, but I'm not too satisfied yet. It did leave me wanting. It left me wanting.
Oh yeah, this this issue definitely made me go like, all right, this is it, I'm in. But at the same time, I read it like I jumped on a treadmill that was already going like 6 miles an hour. You know, when you see people doing stupid stuff on treadmills and they just jump on it when it's already going. That's what I felt like. I was like, and we're going, and we're off. Here we go. I agree that with the whole thing with Destiny and Pyro was kind of like the most badass moment of the issue. I still love, like, because like I'm an asshole, so I'm just like, do it, Hickman. Just shit all over the previous writers, and like the fact that he kept it classy, I'm like, oh man, good for you. And then
he definitely high-roaded this issue pretty hardcore.
He did. He high-roaded it, and that
he elevated everyone who came before him and continued the series on, which was impressive.
I know, and that amazes me because I would just be like, fuck that. So kudos to Hickman, man, for high-roading.
Yeah. I mean,
for sure.
If he could keep up like a story, like a level as this, like because this, in my opinion, of all the issues, was the most information driven, aside from the issue that goes heavy into the AI.
Yeah.
But this issue was like much more of a plot holder for the it's like a nexus, it's like a crux for all the other stories that come out after it. So that's why it's like you really feel like, oh man, like let's take off now. Like I want to go into these timelines. Like that's what I'm ready for. So that's what I appreciate about this issue. But you know, like the time frame, like because they released these, what, House of X was 1 week and then Powers of X was the week after, correct?
Correct.
So it's like I wish they both came out at the same time. Like waiting a week in between those is like kind of. I know it's like it's a very first world problem where I'm like, the comics take too long to get out, but it's like those in between linking stories spread the greater story so far apart that it's like waiting a month to get through all of that is a long time. Where I'm like, if they do them in tandem, it feels more complementative. Like Powers of X and House of X being released at the same time, I feel works really well. Like you get that one story, you still have to read them in order, but you get you get a good jump of like not only one of Moira's lives, but another Moira's life, and then the greater story of what the X-Men are trying to do, and it moves around more of that instead of just like, oh, you get a week of plot development, then a week of action popping off, and then a week of plot development in another part of the timeline, and then some more action popping off. I'm like, no, just keep them neck and neck. But you know, it's still. It didn't take that long to finally eventually get through all of it, and the whole House of X and Powers of X storyline went by kind of fast. Now you look at it.
It did.
It lasted like a couple months, right?
Like 2 months, right?
Yeah.
Like midsummer to October.
Yeah, and it was over. All of a sudden, I was just like, man, I don't know. It's so intriguing. I don't want to wait. But then now we're like, oh, we've digested it already.
Yeah.
But overall, I'd say this issue is paramount in its location and its importance to the greater House of X and Powers of X series.
Absolutely. And Powers of X issue number 2, the next issue, is going to be just as information heavy as we learn more about the AI, more about what happens in the next years. It's going to get intense in the next issue. So it's more information heavy. But after Powers of X2, we're going to slide right into like some easier storytelling, less dense informational storytelling. So
yeah, these two are easily the most information, graph, and legend heavy stories that you have to break through. Like the back of the book is most important in issues 2 of
mhm,
House of X and Powers of X. The other
yes.
ones, they're nice and they're kind of fun, but these ones you really have to break down and think. Like it's like you're going through like a test answer or a question where you're like, okay, how does these information correspond to what I just read, and how can I connect it? Because this is some really technical stuff they're getting into.
Yeah, it's super heavy. And you need to be like, you kind of need to be almost a futurist in many ways. You have to have that mindset of like knowing that like where technology is going and having that concept of that of evolving technology. Like I feel like the average human being would look at this and go like, what is
Well,
happening?
if you look at the fundamentals and the laws of computing and like the averages that they put out, like if you can understand that concept and how it progresses, then you could get the AI and what they're trying to do and how they're explaining how things double based off of certain amounts of powers. It's like these AI functioning hive minds are no different than, how you could look at a processor with multiple cores and things like that. But, if you can grasp that, then you can get what Hickman's trying to pitch. If not, I could definitely see people coming into Powers of X and being like, what is he telling me here?
Right.
Like, how important is this? Is there going to be a test? Like, what do you want from me, Hickman? I just want to see Colossus thrown by Magneto in a fastball special. Which, yeah, I love that too. But
Yeah.
kudos to Hickman for adding this whole new element.
Yeah, and I'm loving every moment of it. But yeah,
We dive into Powers of X.
let's do that. Let's cut this one for now. So we're gonna call this episode. This has been House of X issues number 2, and you'll catch us next week for Powers of X issue number 2. All right, folks, take care, and remember, the AI is gonna kill us all. So just accept it.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Bow down to your overlord.
Bow down to your overlords, people. All right.